Welcome to the Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast, a show created to help painting company owners build a thriving painting business that does well over $1 million in annual revenue. I'm your host, Brandon Pierpont, founder of Painter Marketing Pros and creator of the popular PCA educational series Learn, Do, Grow, Marketing for Painters. In each episode, I'll be sharing proven tips, strategies, and processes from leading experts in the industry on how they found success in their painting business. We will be interviewing owners of the most successful painting companies in North America and learning from their experiences. In this series, titled Third Generation Painter, First Generation Mindset, Joshua Joosten and Cody Roberts of Sequoia Painting will be sharing their story on building a near $2 million residential and commercial painting company based in Tulare County, California. They will be detailing the changes that Sequoia Painting has undergone from starting as a post-retirement hobby for Joshua to a profitable and growing enterprise with a very unique approach to the painting industry. In episode 1, Joshua and Cody discuss the origins of Sequoia Painting from the perspective of a third-generation painter and the transition that needed to happen to create true business intrinsic value. In episode 2, they discuss their counterintuitive organizational structure and how it has improved Sequoia Painting. In episode 3, Joshua and Cody deep dove into the culture of Sequoia Painting and the mission they have to professionalize and elevate the painting industry. In episode 4, this episode, they will lay out the systems and processes that Sequoia Painting has in place to ensure quality and make the company truly scalable. And in the final episode, episode 5, Joshua and Cody will lay out the big future plans for Sequoia Painting, including the potential for a nationwide franchise. If you want to ask Joshua and Cody questions related to anything in this podcast series, you can do so in our exclusive Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast forum on Facebook. Just search for Painter Marketing Mastermind podcast forum on Facebook and request to join the group, or type in the URL facebook.com/groups/Painter Marketing Mastermind. Again, that URL is facebook.com/groups/Painter Marketing Mastermind. There you can ask Joshua and Cody questions directly by tagging them with your question so you can see how anything discussed here applies to your particular painting company. What's up, guys?
How's it going? What's going on?
Doing well. Very excited for this one. The systems and the processes, you guys have been hinting at those, talking a little bit about those for a while now. So I'm excited to dive in.
You bet.
Systems they don't really matter though, when you think about it. You know, it's better just to reinvent the wheel, kind of make it up, you know, new employee, new approach each time.
Yep.
Obviously joking, systems form the backbone of any successful scalable enterprise.
Yes, sir.
And when you don't have good systems, you figure that out when you reach a certain size.
Yep.
So let's kind of start with, how did you guys start building your systems? What was it? I mean, Josh, when you launched it, were you just focused on that from the beginning, or you know, how did that work?
I wasn't obviously, because it was just going to be more of a hobby, so didn't really have any plans on making any systems. And as we started to grow and get, on a larger scale, I was noticing, issues coming up and all these things. And I was like, man, what can I do to prevent that from happening? And talking with my mentor, he had told me one day, and I was calling him for some question, how to handle something, and he tells me, he's like, he goes, I do not mind you calling me. You could call me as many times you want. By this time, I was calling him sometimes 4 to 6 times a day. I had his number on auto. But he kind of told me, that I came from the Department of Corrections, where the systems are in place, for everything, and he kind of said, he's like, why don't you just make all the systems, policies, and procedures like the prison has, but make it into in the painting world, and it was just like a light switch clicked, like, why am I dealing with all these different things? Just, make a system like that lays out everything from, the way we want our foremans, going to the job site, none of our foremans, only on the first day, they will come to the shop to pick up possibly materials or, some kind of equipment that is, pressure washers or something like that. But then after that, they go straight to the job sites every morning after that. And so when he said that, a light switch, I just started to just start putting these, systems in place about the same time when Cody, joined Sequoia Painting, and he helped, put in those in play as well. Um, and that ever since then, I mean, we stop and we always are looking at what kind of problems or what kind of issues are we having right now as, grow what we call growing pains, and how can we put that into a system or, policy or procedure, and anyways, and make that more presentable to our team, and I mean, it was sometimes it's as little as, I remember back when I first opened, little thing like gas, getting a gas for a company vehicle. Someone would call me and say, "Hey, I need gas." And I'd go to the gas station with them and use my debit card to get gas in them, and finally I found a little local gas store here, and they had kind of a good old boy handshake type credit to where you have your employees go there, they sign, how many gallons they use, and then he bills you at the end of the day, to where now we have, company gas cards for every foreman that has a vehicle that is tracked every way, shape, or form. What time, how many gallons, how often do they go to the gas station? So it just, yeah, putting those all into play.
Yeah, I would say, when I came on, Joshua had several well in motion already, as far as SOP for his exterior process, SOP for an interior process, SOP for a cabinet refinishing. And the way I kind of looked at those, I came from a very procedure regulated field. The couple that I have worked in, there's a order to install a water main. There is an order to grade a subdivision, right? So those kind of things he had in play here made perfect sense to me, because there's an efficient way. And then the twofer in a service-based business of having those SOPs is they are customer satisfaction almost guarantors, right? Because if we follow this SOP, we head off the things that have caused the aches and pains in the back. Mrs. Jones calling at 7:05 in the morning, mad because I didn't know your guys were showing up at 7 o'clock this morning. I haven't even gotten a shower. They weren't here till, they were here at 8:30 yesterday, and they're here at 7 o'clock today. Okay, well, there's a reason to be upset. Me as a consumer would be as well, right? So we have a mandatory contact, and or it's laid out with the foreman on day one what his wished start time is, which we strongly influence the hope on that start time also, but it's not a gray area now between the crew and the customer. It's a guarantee. They're going to make that known on day one, what the plan for that start time is moving forward. No more Mrs. Jones getting her shower interrupted, or not even in the shower yet in the morning and during her normal get going routine, and then off to a rocky start, as it were, anytime you have to start a service with the customer not appreciating the first step, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
the SOPs are, I mean, obviously a quality controller, right? Everybody's aware of the processes. Those are those quarterly trainings and recaps, culmination of industry standards and Sequoia standards. We refer to Sequoia as industry plus because there's some things we set a little higher criteria for than what your industry standard layout may be of it. controls the quality, and like something when we go through these quarterly trainings, I don't want anybody listening to think like they can be tedious, they can be kind of monotonous, right? So for some of these guys, they have sat in these quarterly trainings a dozen times, you know what I mean? They're aware, like there's little changes here and there, you know, as things can get better and evolve, but it's a lot of the same information. So it's something I always try to make sure that my perspective of these things is, because I care about you guys enough to know I can back you up no matter what, right? And if we do what Sequoia expects in these SOPs, I know 100% what we're doing out there. I don't have to see you do it. So I know when we're going to pick on Mrs. Jones today. So when Mrs. Jones calls and says, they didn't put 2 coats on my window trim, I know they didn't. It doesn't look like 2 coats got put on it, right? Oh, Mrs. Jones, it sounds like we may have a communication barrier or something. We need to get together and talk about this because we have standards in play. And, you know, Mr. Mendoza is one of our top guys. He is well aware of the standards. And I just, from the employer standpoint, I don't see that being what took place. Maybe he hasn't got to that second coat, or maybe it more than likely got the 2 coats, and maybe we need to add a 3rd coat to your work order if it still doesn't look like a nice finished product for us. But sure, we have things in play that I can guarantee you that that's not what happened. You know what I mean? So giving guys in the field that reassurance that, hey, this isn't a way for us to control every little thing going on out there. No, this is a way for me to guarantee that we can all have each other's back in this crazy thing we call business, right? That I know I can back any one of my guys up if there is any kind of what all adopt Mr. Nick Slavic's people be crazy, right? You're going to get them every once in a while. It's a law of averages, you know. Every once in a while you're going to get that customer that the sky's falling every other day, you know what I mean? And when you have those kind of things in play, you get a real good reaction out of your teams when they know, yes, the customer's right, but I know that we did it the right way, and the way it was presented to you, we were going to do it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it provides.
Go ahead. We always inform all of our, our team out there on the field to CYA, cover your own ass. That's why we have these policies and procedures in place. It's, during the training part or whatever, it may be like, like, we have a 3-step pre-inspection policy in place, SOP. You go around and you're kind of pre-inspecting the place. If you see paint, on a tile roof, or you see paint, on the tile inside or anywhere, that doesn't, know that we didn't put it on there, take pictures of that immediately and notify the customer. Let them know, hey, just to let you know, we haven't, busted out any kind of paint, anything right now, and there's a bunch of paint on your tile roof. I just want to make sure that's clear before we go into it, and then we get blamed for it, so we're always telling them these things are in play for, the CYA to cover your ass, bottom line.
Yeah, it's gonna lend your team, all they need to do then is follow the SOP. And there's no risk that, okay, Mrs. Jones sounds like she might be a little bit of a handful. She's upset, but there's no need to panic or worry about job security, or am I not doing a good job when you have that clear structure.
100%, man. That's exactly it.
And 9 times out of 10, Mrs. Jones is always,
it's a misconception.
Exactly. She's already there. They haven't even put the second coat on yet, type thing. But she's going into the panic mode because she's seeing, streaks or whatever that she's seeing. And most of the time the foreman, can reassure, no, we're still got to do a second coat, and we still got to go through and do a touch up, So
I like one of the things you guys have been focused on is when things go wrong, you build some SOP or process around it. And there's this idea you want to be a fire marshal, not a firefighter. And so you just put out fires all the time, but you actually want to come up with a plan and fix the actual problem.
Yep.
Has that been the way that the majority of your SOPs have been created? Okay, we're going to run the company. Oh, there's an issue. let's circle up and figure out how to never have that issue occur again.
Definitely a big influence on it, most definitely. Because like you said, hey, mow that overgrown field before it catches fire and we got a problem on our hands, right? So I think a lot of we will take a step back and look at it. How often does this happen, right? And if something goes from, man, that was just an extremely special case to that has potential to repeat, then absolutely, let's get in front of that, right? Create happiness, right? So keep the stress of the crews minimal, keep the stress to the customer minimal, and that's really what the evolving of those SOPs is trying to guarantee,
And we're always thinking outside of the box. I'll give you an example. This last year on our last fourth quarter training, we were getting that in 23, we were getting kind of a lot of calls from the foremans in regard to their spray pumps. It's not pumping, it's not doing this, it's not doing that. So Cody and I had a meeting on it. It's like, man, we're getting a lot of these coming in and phone calls, and doing these troubleshootings over the phone, and what can we do to fix that, and so I jump on the phone, we come up with an idea. I jump on the phone to our Draco rep here and said, hey, what kind of resources can we use from you, and I said, these are the issues we're having. And he goes, not a problem, dude. He goes, why don't I just come in and train your guys how to repack a spray gun? And I said, awesome. So he came in here on our fourth quarter training and spent a couple of 2 hours having the guys break down the piston and repacking the spray rigs and troubleshooting different things. And we did not get, knock on wood, we did not get one call this whole entire year about a spray pump not working.
Yep.
They troubleshoot it out there on the job site now, and we're going to turn it into an annual thing. He's already scheduled to come to our fourth quarter training December 13th to do another hour to 2 hour training to keep that, reassure that the guys kind of know what they're doing out there on the field.
I love that. I think one of the reasons that a lot of companies don't provide training is because they're not actually sure what to train on, which can happen if you don't have a ton of SOPs, don't have a ton of processes, then obviously training might be a little bit difficult. But I think that's not thought of too frequently. Like, let's tap our vendors, let's tap the other businesses that we're partnered with, and actually involve them and have them come in and train our guys.
Yep. And we have learned through those growing pains, right, that Josh mentioned earlier, quarterly training, we have made a priority, and we're going to do it because rewind a few years ago, we still had quarterly training that we're just a little too busy to shut down for that right now. So let's reschedule that. Let's reschedule that. Let's reschedule that. Right. And then that quarterly training happened twice that year, or ultimate just one time that year. And then we find ourselves beating our heads against the wall on the things that quarterly training helps bring back in line, helps it come back in line, helps it come back in line, so there was no denying the importance of it, and any business owner out there, if you have a concept of your numbers and you break it all the way down to what painters are bringing in per hour, and you got 13, 14 guys in the field, and you want to shut that down in the heart of busy time, potentially 2 of them are going to happen during really busy times. To have them all sitting in a room to go over this stuff, that's hard. That can be hard to stomach. Like, I just can't justify it. I can't justify it. But peace of mind is a hard thing to put a number on, and we learned that the hard way, getting callbacks or incompleted closeouts and, things left open-ended that were full on breaks of SOP, but we were not getting those freshen up courses. We were not doing it quarterly. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Growth is not linear. A lot of times you'll have to take, a little bit of a step back to take a step forward. And if that temptation is strong, the business is there. Let's keep selling. Let's keep producing. It's
100%, man.
stupid to stop during this time. But then, like you said, there's going to be callbacks. There are going to be dissatisfied customers. Now you have a negative review. Now you're actually not landing some of those projects that you otherwise would have landed if your quality control were in place. Now you have more higher employee turnover. You maybe have some theft or some other things that are happening on the employee side. All that stuff that could have been avoided by biting the bullet and being willing to take that small step back.
That's right.
Absolutely. And you're exactly right, Brandon. Even the callbacks. I ain't trying to toot our own horn by no means, but I could probably count on one hand how many callbacks we've had this year. It's not very rare. I mean, it's not very common. It's very rare that we have a callback,
Yeah.
That's wild for your size.
Yeah, and I really feel that, and going back, that's just the training that we give,
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So we've talked about the importance of processes, how you guys generally create them, generally creating them as you go. You're finding problems and then you're permanently solving those problems, or at least doing your best to.
Yeah.
Let's get into some of the actual SOPs. So I know one that was interesting was, hey, we're going to call the day before. We're going to always make sure that we clarify the start time. It's generally good practice, but not every company does it. And we gave the reason why. Mrs. Jones doesn't want to be surprised, and probably the homeowner is naturally going to assume that the start time is going to be consistent between days, and that may not always be the case.
Yep.
What other SOPs do you guys have that you find very beneficial and or that you think might be a little bit uncommon?
So I'm going to look at one right now so I can kind of glance through it and what may be out of the ordinary. So say for instance, interior painting, part of that SOP is for our crew to know customers' responsibilities versus theirs. That's kind of a gray area in the painting industry, right? And these are things that the customer's informed of through the sales process. And if there's any changes to the customer's responsibilities, the crew will find it in their work order. If they don't find it in their work order, that leaves reason to contact sales or Joshua, myself, through the Slack channel that's created for that job. Hey, I don't see anything about taking down TVs, but they're not taken down. Customer's not here. Please advise, right? Or they have the conversation with the customer because they are there. Are you guys taking these TVs down tomorrow? Like, we won't be in this area today, but will the TVs be taken down by tomorrow morning or whatever it is? So letting them know what the customer's responsibility as far as Sequoia Painting is concerned as a general statement, unless there's any modifications through the sales process. That's a big part of the SOP, whether it's inside cabinets, outside, right? Because the gray area just leaves the door wide open for customer dissatisfaction.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
But Cody, let's explore that one for a second. So let's say you're in the house, the TVs are up. You're fortunate enough in this position, in this hypothetical example, that you don't need to paint right there, right now. You'll come back in the morning, talk with the customer, and they're not going to take the TVs down.
Right.
Well, so now we have a scope creep, right? Change of scope. So what is the SOP then?
So the SOP on that is we have all in our sales statements release the liabilities for those types of items, right? So it's a re-inquiry to the customer. I can move these for you if you're unable to get them out of the way. But just to remind you, we release reliability on these types of items. That's why they're viewed as the customer's responsibility. I mean, these days, right, TV mounts, they're all pretty similar to each other, and typically you can get a flat screen TV off the wall in 10 minutes or less, right? On average, they're not a big task, but it's the release of liability, so the documentation's in the proposal about all that kind of stuff. So if the foreman's able to, that's the SOP part, is the foreman to reiterate that, like, hey, I am going to need these out of my way. I can take them off. I can place them wherever you would like them placed. Just know Sequoia Painting, we release liability of that TV in this process.
Sure.
Most of the time, I mean, and again, and we've never had to buy a TV, Brendan. We've never, you know what I mean? These things,
Yeah.
it's all for like you said, it's the fire marshal, not firefighting, right? So it's in the open, it's known. We can take a TV off and set it down and not have any issues 99% of the time. But reiterating what they signed on their contractual agreement brings it back to the front of their mind, and they can say, okay, it's worth the risk to have them go ahead and do it. If it accidentally gets dropped or kicked or something, like I understand, I'm going to have to buy myself a new TV because that wasn't their responsibility to have that thing moved.
Yeah, I can, so I think some people will be listening and think this is kind of a silly example, right? Like, oh, we could just take the TV down. It's not a huge deal. Why are you guys focused on this? But I think that's sort of the point with
Mhm.
SOPs and processes, right? You
Yep.
start with the things that are most flagrant and biggest things. Showing up while Mrs. Jones is in the shower is obviously going to be a pretty big deal. She's
That's
not
right.
happy about that. Something like this, it could be, well, hey man, if there are little things, just go ahead and knock them out. But when I'm thinking about processes, or like, do I need to build a system around this? I 10x my business, or I 100x my business. If we're doing 2 million, yeah, maybe it's not a big deal. I know our crews, they'll take care of it. What if we're doing 20 million? What if we're doing 200 million?
That's right.
Would I feel the same way about taking down the TV or every little thing? I want the McDonald's hamburger model, right? I have no idea who's there. I've never talked with that person. I've not talked with the person that talks with the person, but I
Yeah.
know that it's going to be handled correctly. I think that's the kind of peak level of SOPs.
No doubt. And something we adopted from our biggest mentor, that I adopted from him being Joshua's mentor, is the argument of, if it's not on paper, it doesn't exist.
I love that.
Right. So I may have all the faith in the world that Mr. Mendoza has taken down 100 TVs and he's never had an issue, or he's moved couches with no collateral damage. They pulled the refrigerator out of its little spot. We haven't ever had to replace any flooring. Right. I know he is amazing at it, and he makes sure things are done carefully like they were his own. Like you stated, you may not always be in a position to know each person individually that deeply. I mean, I know that may sound kind of, I don't ever want to sound disconnected from the company, but that's kind of that can happen, right? Especially depending on what your end goals are, what you're trying to end up as, right? So you got to have it. It's got to be written down. There's got to be a way to cover that, even if it's blanket. It doesn't have to be, okay, now we got to write one for a TV. Now we got to write one for a refrigerator. Now we got to write. They're grouped: customers' responsibilities, Sequoia's responsibilities. Right. And if it falls in those, then we know the answer. If it falls over here, well, we know it's Sequoia's responsibility. That's ours. We don't even have to talk to the customer about that. You know what I mean?
How do you store your SOPs? You have a book, a Google Drive folder. How does the team?
We have everything on Google. So we have created slideshows, of course, for all the training, or I should say Joshua has. He's got a large amount of his time invested in a lot of the slideshows. And he updates them, tries to keep them looking a little different, and that kind of thing. You know what I mean? So slideshows for all those, for the quarterly trainings. And then each van or company vehicle has laminated sets of the SOPs, right? Because there should be. Back to if it's not physical, it doesn't exist. I mean, we have a large digital platform there. We have a whole Slack channel that is, again, all the SOPs can all be found in that Slack channel also, and everybody that is at Sequoia Painting that's not a private channel, it's a public channel for all eyes.
It's an SOP channel.
So it's there. There's copies, laminated copies in every vehicle's binder, because every vehicle has a binder, right? That has
Safety book and
the safety handbook in it. It's got the SOPs. It's got all the foreman, all this stuff for the foreman where you may need to take somebody in the event of an accident. I mean, everything that should be in that binder that is important and of legal purposes, every vehicle has one.
That's thorough. You guys
Well,
are,
it's got to be, it has to be available, right? That's the thing. It's got to be available, and so you make it available in as many ways as you can. So, someday we may be all digital based and not have as much of the physical hard stuff out there, but I think some of those guys, especially if they have that new hire that maybe has never done a cabinet job yet. And that way, now it's not just them following the foreman's lead. The foreman can hand them that SOP and say, hey, you're doing these first 3 lines for me today. This is your part of that. This is your part of the detail today. It's these first 3 lines. I mean, that can sit right on the countertop in the kitchen, right? He can look back and refer to it as many times as needed to know that he's doing what the expectation is.
how frequently are you guys updating these?
What was that?
How frequently are you updating these? Like, do you have an SOP for updating your SOPs?
Yeah.
Right.
We actually created one at Painter Marketing Pros.
Really?
That's
Yeah,
getting
it's a frequent activity, and it seemed, which is ironic, but it seemed a little haphazard how we were doing it. We're like, if we're trying
Right.
to document everything, we should probably have a documented way of documenting everything and changing.
Right. Right. I would say at this point, it has been to be that fire marshal, you know. So luckily, I would say there has been many less updates to them in our recent years compared to at the conception of them, right? So they, I have a weird mindset about things. I don't think there's such thing as like perfect and finished for certain stuff, you know. So I kind of think SOPs will be ever evolving to some aspect, you know. Of course, what controls your finished product, that may just change as products change. You know, that may be the real, you know, a real reason to change the controllers of your quality. But I would hope majority of it's going to always be very, very similar. You know, you learn from mistakes and become better at cutting them off before they happen, right?
Sure. So let's get into either some more of the SOPs and the processes, or a general kind of overview. You know, like, hey, here's how we break them up. Here's, you know, we have sales, or we have admin SOPs, something so that the people listening can really get a better sense of what's in that binder and what they might be wanting to develop on their end.
So let me read through some titles of our slideshows for you, right? Or let's start with this. So what is in all the vehicles that's readily available? Cabinet painting SOP, you got exterior SOP checklist, and you have an interior SOP checklist. And then other nuggets that we have as part of our SOP training and presentations. We do efficiency and productivity. We do white glove cleaning. We do the spray rig cleaning that Joshua spoke of. Leadership and managing your team. And they all are pretty effective. They all kind of segue, some materials repeating. That's kind of by design also. You know, the things that repeat within those are obviously of importance to Sequoia. So we do a whole slideshow just on white glove cleaning, and then white glove cleaning is still everywhere that pertains in an SOP that it belongs to. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So like I said, it can feel kind of redundant, I'm sure, to a lot of the guys that have been through it several times at this point, but we know it's a huge part of what makes us Sequoia Painting. You know what I mean? There's no denying that to us.
Yeah, people have to hear things a lot more than you think that they do.
Yeah.
Understand and actually be able to do it. And then somehow it's just a defect of our human condition, maybe, is that we'll just sort of stop doing it.
I just asked my wife about that comment, right? How many,
Oh, yeah.
how many times you got to hear something, you know, that's it.
Yeah.
Well, we refer that to muscle memory, you
Yeah.
know, in a department. The same thing, go over training, and you're like, gosh, dang, this is crazy. But then like when you're actually involved in an incident and you know everything's going 1,000 miles an hour,
Thank goodness.
yeah, you'll be surprised on how natural things just happen. Like, oh shoot, I didn't realize I can swing the baton like that and hit a person like that with a baton, you know, and it's just muscle memory. So the more you hear it, you know, again, like Cody was saying, we may have a SOP on like job startup, right? So we'll be talking about the whole job startup program. But then in every interior, exterior, cabinet SOPs, they're going to have the job startup form in there that we're going to go over through again. So they're going to hear the job startup 3 or 4 times in that day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think so. That's interesting. You say that, Josh. So so I was in the Army for a bit, and in the military, they talk about how in a high tempo situation, you're going to default to your basically lowest level of training. So you on kind of how you're going to perform on a bad day in training is how you're going to perform at that moment. Whereas I think we like to think we'll all rise to the occasion, but that's not really actually how things play out. And I think from a business perspective, I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind when you're talking about processes, because if we have Cody, what was the gentleman's name who you said took down all the TVs? I know it was a hypothetical example, but he's actually a good team member.
Right, right.
Yeah, so you have certain guys like that, right, that have been working with you for a long time that you personally know that, okay, if there's an issue or a curveball, I know it will get handled. I trust this person. But then you have to actually build the system for the opposite of that person. What would somebody I don't trust, somebody I don't know that much, maybe they slid through the hiring and actually turns out we have a gap in our hiring funnel and our process, and we're going to have to go back and fix that. But this person did come on board.
Yep.
What happens then? And that's the sort of lowest level of training or the muscle memory that I think these processes need to be built to support.
Right. I mean, you're absolutely right. The other thing, you know, is making everything so child-proof, as I say, throughout the whole company, you know, to where
Yeah,
people may
it's a good way to
think,
think about it.
yeah, you know, people may think we're wrong with doing this, but like finding an exterior paint that's a primer finish, because you'll have some painters will say, oh, everything's got to be primed, you know, and you have some painters that will spot prime the raw wood, you know. So for example, with that, we use a product that's a primer finish, you know, to where I can give it to a person that's got 6 months painting or a person that has 30 years painting, put 3 coats of this paint on there, period, you know. And so we try to make everything simple, very simple.
To say we the child proof's not the most flattering term, right? But I do have a belief in if you can explain it to a 3-year-old, usually it's short and simple enough, right, that it's not forgotten. So that's kind of that's the trade-off, you know what I mean? So childproof isn't the most flattering, but if you can get the point across to a 3-year-old, then an adult mind should have no problem understanding and retaining the information.
Yeah. I think another thing too is when you create these childproof SOPs, these things that are short and simple and easy to remember, it allows your employees to actually focus and allows you to actually focus when you're hiring them on a different skill set. So for example, if we already know exactly what's going to happen in terms of the communication with the customer of how the project's going to be laid out and run, there's no question about this, right? If there's an issue of scope, what are we going to do with that?
No.
So then when you're hiring people, you can really focus on their ability to communicate, their ability to be responsible and timely and detail oriented. You don't actually have to worry about necessarily how organized they are. You don't have to worry about some of these other aspects that if your SOPs weren't dialed in, you would actually need them to have a skill set that you don't really need them to have because you've already fixed it for them. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%, right? That's
Try a
that's
lot.
the backbone for, like you're saying, for the masses, the SOP. You're trained on it, you know it, you follow it. Following the SOP meets the expectation of Sequoia Painting. And what a relief, right? To not have to, like you're saying, to be in the field and think that's your entire weight to bear. I mean, your weight to bear as a foreman for us is to run an efficient job site. We do the absolute best we can to give you every tool available to be able to meet that need.
And kind of with what you're talking about, we also look at this too, like our SOPs are very, again, I don't know if it's the right term, childproof, right? If we
We're
have
going with it at this point, Josh. It's too late.
yeah.
We've all subscribed.
Can't backpedal on that.
Yeah.
If we have a foreman that has a hard time constantly going over our SOP and our work order for a small residential house, whether it's small or large, well, we will have some concerns being able to send that foreman to a commercial job that you're going to be reading a 50 to 100-page spec book, and a set of blueprints, if you can't handle these little SOPs, what makes you think I'm going to send you to a commercial project that, again, is going to be way more, especially the government work, prevailing wage stuff. I mean, it's crazy, the spec book on those ones.
That makes sense. Well, guys, this has been super informative. Are there any other SOPs or processes you guys want to cover?
I think for anybody that does not do SOPs, I don't think there's I don't have that many people, so I don't need to worry about it. Like, I don't think SOPs fit that, right? I think if you're a sole proprietor with 2 helpers, put some SOPs together. That's just how strongly I believe in them. And obviously Joshua is the one that initiated the entire SOP program here with his background, where he came from there's an effective, efficient way to do everything, right? So I think, or my feelings, I believe that SOPs are paramount. Even if you only employ a couple people in the field with you, why not take the time to lay those SOPs out? There's no, I think everything's a math equation that can be solved, but I don't know the dollar amount that SOPs save, which just adds to profitability. We noticed firsthand the effects of not doing them regularly. I talked about that earlier. I think the having them regularly and making it a priority is huge. And we learned that through trial and error, by putting it on the back burner, because man, we got way too much on the calendar. I can't shut everything down for a day. Like, there's no way. We learned that the hard way. We had when we started pulling our hair out, towards the end of that year, over all the callbacks and anything else that was going on that we could directly link back to an SOP not being followed. There was no more validation needed than, like, I wish I could do that over again, because we'd be shut down doing SOP training, because this is for the birds. We set ourselves up here. This is not enjoyable, So that's my 2 cents, man, is make them a priority, put them together. If you got 10 years in the industry, you can be considered a master. everything you do, just put it to paper, make it a thing, write it down, write down what you do. If you believe in what you do, write it down, make it a process. There's your SOP.
And I think
We
they,
all stop and we look too, when we have some type of an issue or something, sometimes it may not even be an issue. It may be something, minute. We'll stop and we'll ask each other, where did we fail? How did that happen? Why did that happen? And we'll get on here and we'll create an SOP for that and do training on it. And that way it bites it in the butt and we no longer have that issue again, because your team, if they do something wrong or if something is not playing out like a company wants it to be, you got to stop and look at the ownership of that, and be like, what could I do different to fix that problem, to fix that issue?
Yeah.
And again, it don't have to always necessarily be something that's, happening on a job site or something. I'll tell you, for the longest time, the painters did not understand you do not clock in until you get to the job site. And it's just because over the years, the way the painters do it, you get paid to drive to the job site, and I don't know how many conversations, hundreds of conversations we had with everybody. It's like, you find me a job that will pay you to drive there. Tell them, find me one, It just, but guys just didn't understand it. And finally it was SOP, training, conversation, meetings. I mean, hundreds of them. Finally, now everybody understands the way it works,
some people might have not wanted to understand that one.
Well, of course not,
Right.
Conversations.
For sure, because they actually have to be there on site working for 8 hours,
Yeah. 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 I think a lot of people get intimidated too by this idea of creating SOPs or, I don't know where to start. But Cody, what you said, just, hey, document what you do.
That's it, right?
It can seem kind of
that's
silly, but there's your first
That's
SOP.
it. That's it in a nutshell. 100%, Mr. Pierpont. 100%. You're doing it, right? If you don't have an SOP, you're doing it. You have a way you do things. Document it. And then once it's on paper, then you kind of see it come to life. And then you can, well, why do I waste time doing that? Or, man, I should probably do what I did on Mrs. Jones' house that went really well. For whatever reason, that was the only job I did that on. It just,
And how good of a point,
document it. You're already doing it.
yeah, how good of a point is that too? Because we talk about doing it for the team. And you mentioned even if you have 2 helpers, but even if you have 0 helpers and you're just doing you're a one-man band, when, like you just said, when you write it down, you might look at it and be like, that doesn't make sense. And you actually might free up a bunch of time. Like the Pareto principle, the 80-20, you might realize your time is not being used effectively, or you're doing things that are counterproductive and actually make your life better.
And I'm a believer in the confidence that it instills in your teams. Right? I mean, they know they have a SOP. That's what the customer bought. Now, again, we can go over the laws of averages. You're always going to have the people be crazies occasionally. That's just life, right? You're going to have things to work through, but it instills confidence. They have an SOP. This is the way Sequoia Painting operates. They're good. They're a good thing to have.
Yep. Yeah, you have baseline quality control already established.
Yeah.
You guys want to add anything else before we wrap up this episode?
Nope, just do them. Make them, that's what it comes down to. Make them. Just start writing down what you're already doing. That's how they start.
That advice is good, Cody. It's a lot of people listen and go to workshops and even, the PCA events, but don't necessarily implement. So when you hear stuff like this, that's valuable, just do it.
Just do it.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you for another wonderful episode.
No, thank you, sir. It's been fun.
If you want to learn more about the topics we discussed in this podcast and how you can use them to grow your painting business, visit paintermarketingpros.com/podcast for free training, as well as the ability to schedule a personalized strategy session for your painting company. Again, that URL is paintermarketingpros.com/podcast. Hey there, painting company owners. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Give us your feedback. Let us know how we did. And also, if you're interested in taking your painting business to the next level, make sure you visit the Painter Marketing Pros website at paintermarketingpros.com to learn more about our services. You can also reach out to me directly by emailing me at brandon@paintermarketingpros.com, and I can give you personalized advice on growing your painting business. Until next time, keep growing.